Hello. Welcome. Welcome. Uh, I am here to answer questions that you have about real estate investing. And this particular question comes from an Afford Anything listener who reached out to me on Instagram named Luis. And Luis says, my ex-wife and I own a condo in South Florida in the Coconut Grove area. The cost of it was $350,000, and it is currently worth, the selling price of the condo based on a realtor estimate is $600,000. And we have a mortgage balance. I'm summarizing his message because it's a long message. And the mortgage balance as of today is $157,000. So he bought it for $350,000. It's worth almost double, $600,000. He owes $157,000 on it. And he's using it, he and his ex-wife are using it as a rental property, and it has a negative cash flow of $150 a month. Largely that is because there's a high HOA payment. So his mortgage payment is $1,550. The HOA is $900, which is pretty substantial. Of course, also they are splitting the income 50-50 with a hotel. We have an agreement with a hotel that rents the unit. So I assume based on that it's maybe being used as a short-term rental or something other than a traditional 12-month lease. But it's a 50-50 income agreement with the hotel. So once you lose half of the gross revenue up front and then you bear all of the overhead expenses, it leaves them with negative cash flow. So should they sell it? So the question is, the initial idea of this investment was to secure money for my son's education. We would keep $100,000 for that, and the rest, he and his ex-wife would split 50-50. So if they were to sell it, they would set aside for $600,000 minus paying off the $157,000 left on the mortgage, minus realtor fees, closing costs, commissions, whatever money is left over. They would keep $100,000 for their son's education. The rest of it, they would split 50-50. He also just bought a new house. He's renting out 2 of the bedrooms in that house. And but it's also his personal residence. So he bought it as a personal residence, and he's monetizing his personal residence. So should they sell it? As a general rule, we'll talk generals and then we'll talk specifics, right? As a general principle, I am very leery of any type of negative cash flow property, because if a property pulls money out of your pocket every month, then there's a limit to how many of those you could ever possibly own. If, by contrast, a property puts money in your pocket every month, even if it's not much, even if the property is only putting an extra $100 in your pocket every month, right? As long as that cash flow is positive rather than negative, regardless of how big that number is, if it's a positive cash flow, then you're not limited in the number that you can buy. You're not limited in your growth. If it's negative cash flow, you are. That being said, however, there are also a couple of things to think about with this. So there are huge transaction costs related to selling the property, right? They're going to take a 6% haircut right off the top for real estate realtor transactions, real estate agent transactions. There are going to be a few other closing costs and things like that as well. Also, this is an investment property, not a primary residence, which means their gains will be taxable. And they have some pretty substantial gains. And that is going to be taxable income. Now, they're in Florida. There's no state income tax. That's great. But they're still going to have to pay federal taxes on the gains from this property. So when they are calculating, Luis, what I would say to you is when you're calculating how much you expect to be able to get from this property, think that you're going to get $600,000 minus 6% for realtor fees, minus real estate agent fees, minus maybe 1 or 2% extra, just as another 1% extra, just as a buffer for various ancillary closing costs, right? Minus the $157,000 that you owe on the property. And then whatever that number is, then minus the amount that you pay for taxes, and then calculate those numbers out. And then whatever number is left over, that's the number that you'll be left with if you sell the property. And then so take that, you put $100,000 aside for your son's education, and then you and your ex split the rest 50-50. If you were, the question becomes, once you math all of that out, when you look at that number and when you see the final amount that you are left with, including the amount that y'all are left with, right? The amount that you and your ex-wife and your son will be left with. It becomes a question of opportunity cost. Is there a better use of that money? Or is the primary benefit of having that pot of money still in this house, right? It becomes an opportunity cost question. If you decide to keep the house, of course, I want to see you push it into positive cash flow territory. $150 a month is not bad. It's just not the trend line we want to see, but it's not bad. So I wonder if there are things that you can do, either with regard to the gross rent that you're charging or with regard to the operating overhead that you're paying. Obviously, you can't do anything about the HOA or the mortgage. But are there other elements of repairs, maintenance, management that can be renegotiated, that can be, massaged somehow? Can you adjust any of the operating numbers so that you push into positive cash flow territory? That's ideally what I would like to see. My inclination, I haven't calculated the cap rate on this property, but my inclination is that this probably has a fairly low cap rate. And that having that lump sum, even after you subtract out taxes and after you subtract out everything that I've mentioned that you should subtract out, because this property has risen in value so much, the amount that would be left over that you could put into some type of alternate investment, like a different rental property, either in Florida or elsewhere, could be pretty substantial, right? You're sitting on a property that's worth $600,000, and and you owe 150. So you're sitting on ballpark $440,000 worth of equity divided by you and your ex, right? So 220 each, minus the 50K each for the son. So that's what, 180, right? 170 each. Well, not counting taxes. That's a decent amount of money that you could use to make a 25% down payment or a 30% down payment on another property that might have a higher cap rate. So I am leaning a little bit in that direction, but before you make the final call, I want you to math out exactly. I want you to math it out in exactly the way that I outlined, to see precisely what number are you left with. And then when you look at that number, ask yourself, all right, what would I do if I had a lump sum of that number? Right? If I had that amount of money sitting in my checking account, which is what's going to happen if you sell this property eventually, right? If I had that amount of money sitting in my checking account, what would I do with it? And figure out what you would do with it, figure out what that next best alternative is, and based on that, then you'll know whether or not you want to sell the property. So, Luis, that is my answer. I hope that was helpful. Feel free to write back if you have any follow-ups. So Luis is a student in our course, Your First Rental Property. And once you're a student for life. So Luis enrolled years ago and is a student for life. And I'm super happy to answer his question. For those of you who are thinking about joining, go to affordanything.com/enroll. We reopened for enrollment today, and enrollment is open only for the next 10 days. We close our doors on the 15th of September. So affordanything.com/enroll. We have, it's a 10-week long course. It is cohort based. Everybody moves through it as a group. We have modules on how to analyze properties, how to find properties, how to finance them, how to renovate them, how to manage tenants, everything A to Z of how to buy and manage your first rental property. That's all inside the course. It's a fantastic resource, a great tool. We've surveyed our students. 48% of our alumni have purchased one or more rental properties since taking the course. So we're very proud of our student success rate. And it's a very high touch, white glove kind of experience. We have study halls, we have active investor mastermind calls, we have forums where our TAs, our teachers' assistants, actively participate. So come check it out, affordanything.com/enroll for all of the information that you need. I hope to see you in class. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a voicemail and we'll answer it on the podcast, or drop me a note on Instagram. And here at YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all of the above. Thank you so much for being part of this broadcast. Have a great night.